The Sibylline Oracles, Book 3. Blessed Heavenly One, who thunders on high, who have the cherubim as your throne, I entreat you to give a little rest to me who have prophesied unfailing truth. For my heart is tired within. But why does my heart shake again? Why is my spirit lashed by a whip, compelled from within to proclaim an oracle to all? But I will utter everything again, as much as God bids me say to men. Men, who have the form which God moulded in his image, why do you wander in vain, and not walk the straight path, ever mindful of the immortal Creator? There is one God, sole ruler, ineffable, who lives in the sky, self-begotten, invisible, who himself sees all things. No sculptor's hand made him, nor does he cast of gold or ivory reveal him, but the crafts of man. But he himself, eternal, revealed himself, as existing now, and formerly and again in the future. For who, being mortal, is able to see God with eyes, or who will be able to even to hear only? The name of the great heavenly God who rules the world, who created everything by a word, heaven and sea, untiring sun, full moon, shining stars, strong mother Tethys, springs and rivers, imperishable fire, days, nights. Indeed, it is God himself who fashioned Adam of 4 letters, the first formed man, fulfilling by his name east and west and south and north. He himself fixed the shape of the form of men, and made wild beasts and serpents and birds. You neither rever nor fear God, but wander to no purpose, worshipping snakes, sacrificing to cats, speechless idols, and stone statues of people, and sitting in front of the doors at godless temples. You do not fear the existing God who guards all things. You rejoice in the evil of stones, forgetting the judgment of the immortal Saviour, who created heaven and earth. Alas, for a race which rejoices in blood, a crafty and evil race of impious and false, double-tongued men and immoral, adulterous idol-worshippers who plot deceit. There is wickedness in their breasts, a frenzy raging within. They ravage booty for themselves and have a shameless spirit. For no one who is rich and has possessions will give a share to another, but there will be a terrible wickedness among all mortals. They will have no fidelity at all. Many widowed women will love other men secretly for gain, and those who have husbands will not keep hold of the rope of life. But when Rome will rule over Egypt, guiding it towards a single goal, then indeed the most great kingdom of the immortal King will become manifest over men, for a holy prince will come to gain sway over the scepters of the earth forever, as time presses on. And then also implacable wrath will fall upon Latin men. 3 will destroy Rome with a piteous fate. All men will perish in their own dwellings when the fiery cataract flows from heaven. Alas, wretched ones, when will that day come, and the judgment of the great King, immortal God? Yet, just for the present, be founded cities, and all be embellished with temples and stadia, markets, and gold and silver, and stone statues, so that you may come to the bitter day. For it will come, when the smell of brimstone spreads amongst all men. But I will tell all in turn, in how many cities mortals will endure evil. Then Beliar will come from the Sebastanoid, and he will raise up the heights of the mountains. He will raise up the sea, the great fiery sun, the shining moon, and he will raise up the dead and perform many signs for men, but they will not be effective in him. But he will indeed also lead men astray, and he will lead astray many faithful, chosen Hebrews, and also other lawless men who have not yet listened to the word of God. But whenever the threats of the great God draw nigh, and a burning power comes through the sea to land, it will also burn Beliar and all overbearing men, as many as put faith in him. Then indeed the world will be governed under the hands of a woman, and be obedient in everything. Then when a widow reigns over the whole world, and throws gold and silver into the wondrous brine, and casts the bronze and iron of ephemeral men into the sea, then all the elements of the universe will be bereft, when God, who dwells in the sky, rolls up the heavens as a scroll is rolled, and the whole variegated vault of heaven falls on the wondrous earth and ocean. An undying cataract of raging fire will flow and burn earth, burn sea, and melt the heavenly vault and days and creation itself into one, and separate them into clear air. There will no longer be twinkling spheres of luminaries, no night, no dawn, no numberless days of care, no spring, no summer, no winter, no autumn. And then indeed the judgment of the great God will come into the midst of the great world, when all these things happen. Oh, for the floating waters and all dry land, and the rising sun which will never set again. All will obey him as he enters the world again, because it was the first to recognize his power also. But when the threats of the great God are fulfilled, with which he once threatened men when they built the tower in the land of Assyria, they were all of one language, and they wanted to go up to starry heaven. But immediately the Immortal One imposed a great compulsion on the winds, and then the winds cast down the great tower from on high, and stirred up strife for mortals amongst themselves. Therefore humans gave the city the name Babylon. But when the tower fell, and the tongues of men were diversified by various sounds, the whole earth of humans was filled with fragmented kingdoms. Then was the 10th generation of articulate men, from the time when the flood came upon the men of old. Kronos and Titan and Iapetus reigned, the best children of Gaia and Uranos, whom men called earth and heaven, giving them a name, because they were the first of articulate men. The portions of the earth were threefold, according to the lot of each, and each one reigned, having his share, and they did not fight, for they were oaths imposed by their father, and the divisions were just. When the full time the old age of the father came, he also died, and the sons made a dire transgression of oaths, and stirred up strife against each other as to who should have royal honor and reign over all men. Kronos, Titan, fought against each other, but Rhea, Gaia, Aphrodite, who loves crowns, Demeter, Hestia, and fair-tressed Diona, brought them to friendship, having assembled all the kings, kindred, and brothers, and other men who were of the same blood and parents. And they chose Kronos king to rule over all, because he was the eldest and best in appearance. But Titan, for his part, imposed great oaths on Kronos, that he should not rear a family of male children, so that he himself might reign when old age and fate came upon Kronos. Whenever Rhea gave birth, the Titans sat by her, and they tore apart all the male children. But they allowed the females to live and be reared with their mother. But when Lady Rhea gave birth in the third childbearing, she brought forth Hera first. When they saw with their eyes the female species, the Titans, savage men, went home. Then Rhea bore a male child, whom she quickly sent away to be reared secretly and in private to Phrygia, having taken 3 Cretan men under oath, and therefore they named him Zeus, because he was sent away. Similarly, she sent away Poseidon secretly. Further, the third time, Rhea, marvel of women, bore Pluto as she went past Dodona, whence the watery paths of the river Europus flowed, and the water ran into the sea mingled with the Panesius, and they called it Stygian. When the Titans heard that children existed in secret, when Kronos had begotten with Rhea his consort, Titan assembled 60 sons, and held Kronos and Rhea, his consort, in fetters. He hid them in the earth and guarded them in bonds. And then indeed the son of mighty Kronos heard it, and they stirred up great war and din of battle against him. And this is the beginning of war for all mortals, for this is the beginning of war for mortals. Then God inflicted evil upon the Titans, and all the descendants of Titans and of Kronos died. But then as time pursued its cyclical course, the kingdom of Egypt arose, then that of the Persians, Medes, and Ethiopians, and Assyrian, Babylon, then that of the Macedonians, of Egypt again, and then Rome, and bade me prophesy concerning every land, and remind kings of the things that are to be. And God first put this in my mind: how many kingdoms of men will be raised up? The house of Solomon will rule first of all, and the Phoenicians, who disembark on Asia and other islands, and the race of the Pamphylians, and Persians and Phrygians, Carians and Mysians, and the race of the Lydians, rich in gold. Then the overbearing and impious Greeks, another great diverse race of Macedonia, will rule, who will come as a terrible cloud of war on mortals, but heavenly God will destroy them from the depth. But then will be the beginning of another kingdom, white, many-headed, from the western sea. It will rule over much land, and will shake many, and will thereafter cause fear to all kings. It will destroy much gold and silver from many cities, but there will again be gold on the wondrous earth, and then silver also ornament. They will also oppress mortals. But those men will have a great fall when they launch on a course of unjust haughtiness. Immediately compulsion to impiety will come upon these men. Male will have intercourse with male. They will set up boys in houses of ill fame in those days. There will be a great affliction among men, and will throw everything into confusion. It will cut up everything and fill everything with evils, with disgraceful love of gain, ill-gotten wealth. And in many places, but especially in Macedonia, it will stir up hatred. Every kind of deceit will be found amongst them until the 7th reign, when a king of Egypt, who will be of the Greeks by race, will rule. Then the people of the great God will again be strong, who will be guides in life for all mortals. But why did God also prompt me to say this? What first? What next? What will be the final evil of all men? What will be the beginning of all these things? First, God will inflict evil upon the Titans, for they will make retribution to the sons of the mighty Kronos, because they bound Kronos and the noble mother. Second, the Greeks will have tyrannies and proud kings, overbearing and impious, adulterous and wicked in all respects. There will no longer be respite from war for mortals. All the terrible Phrygians will perish, and evil will come upon Troy on that day. Immediately evil will also come upon the Persians and Assyrians, all Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopians, so that great evil will be shared amongst the Carians and the Pamphylians and all men. But why should I narrate them individually? But when the first things reach an end immediately, the second things will come upon men. I will proclaim to you the first of all. Evil will come upon the pious men who live around the great temple of Solomon, and who are offspring of righteous men. Nevertheless, I will also proclaim the race of these, and the genealogy of their father, and the people of them all very thoughtfully. O devious, crafty mortal! There is a city in the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, whence comes a race of most righteous men. They are always concerned with good counsel and noble works, for they do not worry about the cyclical course of the sun, or the moon, or the monstrous things under the earth, nor the depths of the grim sea. Oceanus, no portents of sneezes, no birds of augurers, no seers, no sorcerers, no soothsayers, nor the deceits of foolish words of ventriloquists. Neither did they practice the astrological predictions of the Chaldeans, nor astronomy, for all these things are erroneous, such as foolish men inquire into day by day, exercising themselves at a profitless task. And indeed they have taught errors to shameful men, from which many devils come upon mortals on earth, so that they are misled as to good ways and righteous deeds. But they care for the righteous and the virtue, and not love of money, which begets innumerable evils for mortal men, war, limitless famine. They have just measurements in field and cities, and they do not carry out robberies at night against each other, nor drive off herds of oxen, sheep, or goats. Nor does neighbor move the boundaries of neighbor. Nor does a very rich man grieve a lesser man, nor oppress widows in any respect, but rather helps them, always going to their aid with corn, wine, and oil. Always a prosperous man amongst the people gives a share of the harvest to those who have nothing, but are poor, fulfilling the word of the great God, the hymn of the law, for the heavenly one gave the earth in common to all. But when the people of 12 tribes leave Egypt and travels the path with leaders sent by God, traveling along at night with a pillar of fire, and travels by day every dawn with a pillar of cloud, he will appoint a great man as leader of the people, Moses, whom the queen found by the marsh, took home, reared, and called her son. But when he came leading this people, which God led from Egypt to the mountain Sinai, God also gave forth the law from heaven, having written all just ordinances on 2 tablets and enjoined them to perform it. If anyone should disobey, he would pay the penalty by the law, whether at human hands or escaping men. He would be utterly destroyed in all justice, for the heavenly one gave the earth in common to all, and fidelity and excellent reason in their breasts. For these alone the fertile soil yields fruit, from 1 to 100-fold, and the measures of God are produced. But on these also evil will come, and they will not escape pestilence. And you will surely flee, leaving the very beautiful temple, since it was your fate to leave the holy plain. You will be led to the Assyrians, and you will see innocent children and wives in slavery to hostile men. All means of livelihood and wealth will perish. The whole earth will be filled with you, and every sea. Everyone will be offended at your customs. Your whole land will be desolate. Your fortified altar and temple of the great God and long walls will all fall to the ground, because you did not obey in your heart the holy law of the immortal God, but in error you worshipped unseemly idols, and you did not fear the immortal begetter of gods and of all men, but were not willing to honor him. But you honored the idols of mortals. And therefore for 7 decades of time all your fruitful earth and the wonders of the temple will be desolate. But a good end and very great glory await you, as immortal God decreed for you. But you remain trusting in the holy laws of the great God, whenever he may lift your wearied knee upright to the light, and when the heavenly God will send a king, and will judge each man in blood and the gleam of fire. There is a certain royal tribe whose race will never stumble. This too, as time pursues its cyclical course, will reign, and it will begin to raise up a new temple of God. All the kings of the Persians will bring to their aid gold and bronze and much wrought iron. For God himself will give a holy dream by night, and then indeed the temple will again be as it was before. When indeed my spirit ceased the inspired hymn, and I entreated the great begetter that I might have respite from compulsion, the word of the great God rose again in my breast, and bade me prophesy concerning every land, and remind kings of the things that are to be. God prompted me to say this first: how many grievous woes the immortal devised for Babylon, because it destroyed his great temple. Woe to you, Babylon, and race of Assyrian men! At some time, rushing destruction will come upon the whole land of sinners, and a tumult will destroy the entire land of mortals, and an affliction of the great God, leader of hymns. For a heavenly eternal destruction will come upon you, Babylon, one day from above, and all the children of wrath, but it will come down upon you from heaven, from the holy ones. And then you will be as you were before, as if you had not been. Then you will be filled with blood, as you yourself formerly poured out the blood of good men and righteous men, whose blood even now cries out to high heaven. A great affliction will come upon you, Egypt, against your homes, a terrible one, which you never expected to come upon you. For a sword will pass through your midst, and scattering and death and famine will lay hold of you in the seventh generation of kings, and then you will rest. Woe to you, land of Gog and Magog, situated in the midst of Ethiopian rivers. How great an effusion of blood you will receive, and you will be called a habitation of judgment amongst men, and your dewy earth will drink black blood. Woe to you, Libya! Woe to you, sea and land, daughters of the west! How you have come to a bitter day! You will also come pursued by a hard struggle, terrible and hard. There will again be a terrible judgment, and you will all of necessity go to destruction, because you have utterly destroyed the great house of the immortal, and have chewed it terribly with iron teeth. Therefore you will see your land full of corpses, some slain by war, and every assault of the demon of famine and pestilence. Others by barbarous spirited enemies. All your land will be desolate, and your cities desolate ruins. But in the west a star will shine, which they call Cometes, a sign to mortals of sword, famine, and death, destruction of leaders, and of great illustrious men. There will again be a very great sign among men. The deep-flowing Tanais will leave Lake Mytos, and there will be the track of a fertile furrow down that deep stream. While the immense current occupies a narrow channel, there will be chasms and yawning pits. Many cities will fall with their inhabitants. In Asia, Iasus, Sebren, Pandonia, Colophon, Ephesus, Nicaea, Antioch, Tanagra, Sinope, Smyrna, Maros, prosperous Gaza, Hierapolis, Astapalea of Europe, famous Sigra, royal Meropia, Antigone, Magnesia, divine Mycenae. Known then that the destructive race of Egypt is near destruction, and then for the Alexandrians the year which has passed will be the better one. However, much wealth Rome received from the tribute-bearing Asia will receive 3 times that much again, for Rome, and will repay her deadly arrogance to her. Whatever number from Asia served the house of Italians, 20 times that number of Italians will be serfs in Asia, in poverty, and they will be liable to pay 10,000-fold of luxurious golden offspring of Latium, Rome, virgin often drunken with your weddings with many suitors. As a slave you will be wed without decorum. Often the mistress will cut your delicate hair, and dispensing justice will cast you from heaven to earth. But from earth will again rise you up to heaven, because mortals are involved in a wretched and unjust life. Samos will be sand, and Delos will become inconspicuous. Rome will be a street. All the oracles will be fulfilled. Smyrna will perish, and there will be no mention of it. There will be an avenger. But for the bad counsels and the wickedness of its leaders, serene peace will return to the Asian land, and Europe will be blessed. The air will be good for pasture for many years, bracing free from storms and hail, producing everything, including birds and creeping beasts of the earth, almost blessed. Whatever man or woman will live to what time. There will be report of the blessed ones as among country folk. For all good order and righteous dealings will come upon men from starry heaven, and with it temperate concord. Best of all things for men and love, faithfulness and friendship, even from strangers. Bad government, blame, envy, anger, folly, poverty will flee from men, and constraint will flee, and murder, accursed strife, and grievous quarrels, night robberies, and every evil in those days. But Macedonia will bring forth a great affliction for Asia, and a very great grief for Europe will spring up from the race of Kronos, the progeny of bastards and slaves. She will conquer even the fortified city of Babylon, having been called mistress of every land which the sun beholds. She will perish by evil fate, leaving a name among her much wandering posterity. Also at a certain time there will come to the prosperous land of Asia a faithless man, clad with a purple cloak on his shoulders, savage, stranger to justice, fiery, for a thunderbolt beforehand raised him up, a man. But all Asia will bear an evil yoke, and the earth, deluged, will imbibe much gore. But even so Hades will attend him in everything, though he knows it not. Those race he wished to destroy, by them will his own race be destroyed, and yet leaving one root, which the destroyer will also cut off. From 10 horns he will sprout another shoot on the side. He will smite a warrior and begetter of a royal race, and he himself will perish at the hands of his descendants in a conspiracy of war. And then the horn growing on the side will reign. There will also be immediately a sign for fertile Phrygia, when the abominable race of Rhea, a perennial shoot in the earth, flourishing with unthirsting roots, will disappear, stump and all, in a single night. In the city of the earth-quaking land-shaker, complete with its inhabitants, which they will at one time call by the name of Dodelion, of ancient, much-lamented dark Phrygia. That time is by name Earth-shaker. It will scatter the hiding places of the earth and undo walls. The signs will be a beginning, not of good, but of evil. It will have princes who are knowledgeable in the war of all tribes, producing native descendants of Aeneas, kindred blood. But thereafter you will be a prey to men who are lovers. Ilium, I pity you, for a fury will sprout in Sparta, a very beautiful, famous, most excellent shoot, leaving the widespread waves of Asia and Europe. It will bring lamentations and labor and groans, and inflict them especially on you. But your fame will be ageless for future generations. There will also be again a certain false writer, an old man of falsified fatherland. The light will go out in his eyes. He will have much intelligence, and will have speech well proportioned to his thoughts, blended under 2 names. He will call himself Achaean, and write the story of Ilium, not truthfully, but cleverly, for he will master my words and meters. He will be the first to unfold my books with his hands, but he will especially embellish the helmeted men of war. Hector, son of Priam, and Achilles, son of Peleus, and others, as many as cared for warlike deeds. He will also make gods to stand by these, writing falsely in every way about empty-headed men. It will also be a great story for these to die at Ilium, but he himself will also receive appropriate recompense. For Lycia, also the race of Locrus, will engender many evils. Chalcedon, to whose lot has fallen the way of the sea strait, you also will, Anatolian youth, at some time come and destroy. Cyzicus, the sea will also break off your great wealth. You, Byzantium, will love war in Asia, and receive groans and blood beyond reckoning. Kragos also, lofty mountain of Lycia. Water will rush from your peaks when the rock has been opened in a chasm, until it stops even the prophetic signs of Patara. Sicyon, inhabitants of wine-selling Propontis, the crested wave of Rhyndakas will crash around you. You also, Rhodes, will indeed be free from slavery for a long time. Daughter of a day, and you will have great wealth thereafter, and you will have power at sea surpassing others. But afterwards you will be a prey to lovers in beauty and wealth. You will place a terrible yoke on your neck. A Lydian earthquake will destroy the affairs of Persia, causing most dire disasters for Europe and Asia. The destructive king of the Sidonians and the battle cry of others will bring deadly destruction by sea on the Samians. The plain will sweep into the sea with the blood of perishing men. Wives with splendidly robed maidens will cry aloud. The private, unseemly outrage, some for the dead, some for sons who are perishing. A sign for Cyprus, an earthquake, will destroy the ravines, and Hades will receive many souls at once. Turalis, the neighbor of Ephesus, will all undo by an earthquake, her well-made walls and a people of grave-minded men. The earth will flood with boiling water, then the earth, weighed down, will drink of it. There will be a smell of brimstone. Samos also will build royal palaces in due time. Italy, no foreign war will come to you, but native blood, much bemoaned, inexhaustible, notorious, will ravage you, shameless one. And you yourself, stretched out by the warm ashes, will kill yourself with no foresight in your breast. You will not be mother of good people, but nurse of wild beasts. But when a destructive man comes from Italy, then Laodicea, dashed down headlong by the wonderful water of Lycus, beautiful town of the Carians, you will bemoan your famous parent and be silent. The Thracian Crobizi will rise up throughout Hamus. Chattering of teeth will come upon the Campanians because of the famine which destroys cities. Cyrnus, bemoaning its aged parent, and Sardinia will sink in the wave with sea children amid great storm of winter, and afflictions of the holy God throughout the depths of the sea. Alas, for all the virgins whom Hades will wed, and unburied youths whom the deep will attend. Alas, for infant children floating in the sea, and great wealth. The blessed land of Mysians will suddenly produce a royal race. Truly, Carthage will not survive long. There will be lamentation with many groans amongst the Galatians. A final but greatest disaster will come upon Tenedos, Brazen, Sicyon, and you, Corinth, will boast over all with howls, and the flute will sound equally. When indeed my spirit stopped its inspired hymn, the utterance of the great God arose in my breast and bade me prophesy concerning the earth. Woe to you, to the race of Phoenician men and women, and all the maritime cities. None of you will come to the sunlight in common light. No longer will there be a number and tribe alive because of the unjust tongue and lawless, unholy life which all have carried out, opening an unholy mouth, and they composed terrible words, false, unjust, and stood before God the great King, and they opened their loathsome mouth falsely. Therefore God will terribly subdue them with afflictions beyond all the earth, and send a bitter fate upon them, burning the cities from the ground and many foundations. Woe to you, Crete, of many sorrows! To you will come affliction and fearful eternal destruction. The whole earth will again see you smoking, and fire will not leave you forever, but you will burn. Woe to you, Thrace! How you will come to a yoke of slavery, when Galatians mingled with the Dardedane, ravaged Greece with a swoop. And then will evil come upon you. You will give to another land, and will receive nothing. Woe to you, Gog and Magog, and to all in turn of the Marcians and Angeans. How many evils fate brings upon you, many too upon the sons of the Lycians and Maceans and Phrygians. Many people of the Pamphalians and Lydians will fall. Morians and Ethiopians and strange-speaking peoples, Cappadocians and Arabs. Why, indeed, should I proclaim each one according to his fate? For on all peoples, as many as inhabit the earth, will the Most High send a terrible affliction. But when a vast barbarian people comes against the Greeks, it will destroy many heads of chosen men. They will ravage many fat flocks which belong to mortal men, and herds of horses and mules, and loud bellowing oxen. They will burn well-constructed houses lawlessly with fire, and will take many slaves to another land by compulsion, children and broad-girdled women, delicate ones from the chambers falling forward on tender feet. They will see themselves suffering every terrible outrage in fetters at the hand of strange-speaking enemies, and they will have no one to ward off a war, little or be a helper in life. They will see the enemy enjoy their private possessions and all their wealth. They will tremble beneath the knees. 100 will flee, but one will destroy them all. 5 will stir up grievous wrath, but shamefully coming to grips with each other in terrible war and din of battle. They will cause joy to their enemies, but grief to the Greeks. A yoke of slavery will come upon all Greece at once, and pestilence will come upon all. God will make a great bronze heaven on high, and cause drought over the whole earth, and make the earth iron. But then all mortals will weep terribly for the lack of sowing and ploughing, and the one who created heaven and earth will set down much lamented fire on the earth. 1/3 of all mankind will survive. Greece, why do you rely on mortal leaders who are not able to flee the end of death? To what purpose do you give vain gifts to the dead and sacrifice to idols? Who put error in your heart that you should abandon the face of the great God and do these things? Rever the name of the one who has begotten all. Do not forget it. It's 1,000 years and 500 more since the overbearing kings of the Greeks reigned, who began the first evils of mortals, setting up many idols of dead gods. On account of them you have been taught vain thinking. But when the wrath of the great God comes upon you, then indeed you will recognize the face of the great God. All the souls of men will groan mightily and stretch out their hands straight to broad heaven, and begin to call on the great King as protector, and seek who will be a deliverer from great wrath. But come and learn this, and place it in your heart, how many woes there will be as the years circle on. Greece also, by offering the holocausts of oxen and loud bellowing bulls, which she has sacrificed at the temple of the great God, will escape the din of war and panic and pestilence, and will again escape the yoke of slavery. But the race of impious men will survive up to this point, whenever this fated day comes to pass. You will certainly not sacrifice to God until everything happens. What God alone has planned will not go unfulfilled. A strong necessity will insist that everything be fulfilled. There will again be a sacred race of pious men who attend to the counsels and intention of the Most High, who fully honor the temple of the great God with drink offerings and burnt offerings and sacred hecatombs, sacrifices of well-fed bulls, unblemished rams, and firstborn sheep, offering as holocausts fat flocks of lambs on a great altar in holy manner. Sharing in the righteousness of the law of the Most High, they will inhabit cities and rich fields in prosperity, themselves exalted as prophets by the Immortal, and bringing great joy to all mortals. For to them alone did the great God give wise counsel and faith and excellent understanding in their breasts. They do not honor with empty deceits works of men, either gold or bronze or silver or ivory or wood and stone or clay idols of dead gods, red-painted likenesses of beasts, such as mortals honor with empty-minded counsels. For on the contrary, at dawn they lift up holy arms towards heaven, from their beds always sanctifying their flesh with water, and they honor only the Immortal who always rules, and then their parents. Greatly surpassing all men, they are mindful of holy wedlock, and they do not engage in impious intercourse with male children, as do the Phoenicians, Egyptians, and Romans, spacious Greece, and many nations of others. Persians, Galatians, and all Asia, transgressing the holy law of immortal God, which they transgressed. Therefore, the Immortal will inflict on all mortals disaster, and famine, and woes, and groans, and war, and pestilence, and lamentable ills, because they were not willing to piously honor the immortal begetter of all men, but honored idols made by hand, revering them, which mortals themselves will cast away, hiding them in clefts of rock, through shame, Whenever the young seventh king of Egypt rules his own land, numbered from the dynasty of the Greeks, which the Macedonians, wonderful men, will found. A great king will come from Asia, a blazing eagle, who will cover the whole land with infantry and cavalry. He will cut up everything and fill everything with evils. He will overthrow the kingdom of Egypt. He will take out all its possessions and ride on the broad back of the sea. Then they will bend a white knee on fertile ground to God, the great immortal King. But all handmade works will fall in a flame of fire. And then God will give great joy to men. For earth and trees and countless flocks of sheep will give to men the true fruit of wine, sweet honey, white milk and corn, which is best of all for mortals. But you, devious mortal, do not tarry in hesitation, but turn back, converting and propitiating God. Sacrifice to God hundreds of bulls and firstborn lambs and goats at the recurring times, but propitiate him, the immortal God, so that he may have pity, for he alone is God, and there is no other. Honor righteousness, and oppress no one, for so the immortal bids, wretched mortals. But you guard against the wrath of the great God, whenever the culmination of pestilence comes upon all mortals, and they are subdued and meet with terrible justice. King will lay hold of king, take away territory. Peoples will ravage peoples, and potentates, tribes, all leaders will flee to another land. The land will have a change of men, and foreign rule will ravage all Greece and drain off the rich land of its wealth, and men will come face to face in strife amongst themselves because of gold and silver. Love of gain will be shepherd of all evils for cities. All will be unburied in a foreign country. Vultures and wild beasts of the earth will ravage the flesh of some, and indeed, when this is completed, the huge earth will consume the remains of the dead. It itself will be completely unsown and unplowed, wretched, proclaiming the curse of innumerable men for many lengths of yearly recurring times. Light shields, long shields, javelins, and diverse weapons, and not even wood will be cut from a thicket for the flame of the fire. And then God will send a king from the sun who will stop the entire earth from evil war, killing some, imposing oaths of loyalty on others, and he will not do all these things by his private plans, but in obedience to the noble teachings of the great God. The temple of the great God will be laden with very beautiful wealth, gold, silver, and purple ornament, and earth will be productive and sea full of good things. Kings will begin to be angry with each other, requiting evils with spirit. Envy is not good for wretched mortals, but again the kings of the people will launch an attack together against this land, bringing doom upon themselves, for they will want to destroy the temple of the great God, the most excellent men, when they enter the land. The abominable kings, each one with his throne and faithful people, will set them up around the city. And God will speak with a great voice to the entire ignorant, empty-minded people, and judgment will come upon them from the great God, and all will perish at the hand of the immortal. Fiery swords will fall from heaven on the earth. Torches, great gleams will come shining into the midst of men. The all-bearing earth will be shaken in those days by the hand of the immortal, and the fish in the sea, and all the wild beasts of the earth, and innumerable tribes of birds, and all the souls of men, and all the sea will shudder before the face of the immortal, and there will be a terror. He will break the lofty summits of the mountains and the mounds of giants, and the dark abyss will appear to all. High ravines in lofty mountains will be full of corpses. Rocks will flow with blood, and every torrent will fill the plain. All well-constructed walls of hostile men will fall to the ground, because they knew neither the law nor the judgment of the great God, but with mindless spirit you all launched an attack and raised spears against the sanctuary. God will judge all men by war and sword and fire and torrential rain. There will also be brimstone from heaven and stone and much grievous hail. Death will come upon four-footed creatures. Then they will recognize the immortal God who judges these things. Wailing and tumult will spread throughout the boundless earth at the death of men. All the impious will bathe in blood. The earth itself will also drink of the blood of the dying. Wild beasts will be sated with flesh. God himself, the great eternal one, told me to prophesy all these things. And these things will not go unfulfilled, nor is anything left unaccomplished that he so much as puts in mind. For the Spirit of God, which knows no falsehood, is throughout the world. But the sons of the great God will all live peacefully around the temple, rejoicing in these things which the Creator, just judge, and sole ruler will give. For he alone will shield them, standing by them magnificently, as if he had a wall of blazing fire about them. They will be free from war in towns and country. No hand of evil war, but rather the immortal himself. And the hand of the Holy One will be fighting for them. And then all islands and cities will say, how much the immortal loves those men. For everything fights on their side and helps them. Heaven, divinely driven sun and moon. But the all-bearing earth will be shaken in those days. They will bring forth from their mouths a delightful utterance in hymns. Come, let us all fall on the ground and entreat the immortal King, the great eternal God. Let us send to the temple, since he alone is sovereign, and let us all ponder the law of the Most High God, who is most righteous of all throughout the earth. But we had wandered from the path of the immortal. With a mindless spirit we revered things made by hand, idols and statues of dead men. The souls of faithful men will cry out as follows. Come, let us fall on our faces throughout the people of God, and let us delight with hymns of God the begetter throughout our homes, gathering the weapons of enemies throughout all the land for 7 lengths of annually recurring times. Light shields, long shields, helmets, many diverse arms, a large number of bows also, and an abundance of unjust weapons, for not even wood will be cut from a thicket for the flame of the fire. But wretched Greece, desist from proud thoughts. Entreat the great-hearted immortal and take precautions. Do not send against this city your thoughtless people, which is not from the holy land of the Great One. Do not disturb Camarina, for it is better undisturbed. Do not disturb a leopard from its lair, lest evil befall you, but keep away from it. Do not have a proud, overbearing spirit in your breast, making ready for a hard contest. Serve the great God so that you may have a share in all these things. When indeed this fated day also reaches its consummation, and the judgment of immortal God comes upon mortals, a great judgment and dominion will come upon men. For the all-bearing earth will give the most excellent, unlimited fruit to mortals, of grain and wine and oil, a delightful drink of sweet honey from heaven, trees, fruit of the top branches, and rich flocks and herds and lambs of sheep and kids of goats. And it will break forth sweet fountains of white milk. The city will be full of good things, and the fields will be rich. There will be no sword on earth or din of battle, and the earth will no longer be shaken, groaning deeply. There will no longer be war or drought on earth, no famine, no hail damaging to fruits, but there will be great peace throughout the whole earth. King will be a friend to king to the end of the age. The immortal in the starry heaven will put in effect a common law for men throughout the whole earth, for all that is done amongst wretched mortals. For he himself alone is God, and there is no other, and he himself will burn with fire a race of grievous men. But urge on your minds in your breasts, and shun unlawful worship. Worship the living one. Avoid adultery and indiscriminate intercourse with males. Rear your offspring and do not kill it, for the immortal is angry at whoever commits these sins. And then indeed he will raise up a kingdom for all ages among men. He who once gave the holy law to the pious, to all of whom he promised to open the earth and the world and the gates of the blessed, and all joys and immortal intellect and eternal cheer. From every land they will bring incense and gifts to the house of the great God. There will be no other house among men, even for future generations to know, except the one which God gave to faithful men to honor, for mortals will invoke the Son of the great God. All the paths of the plain and rugged cliffs, lofty mountains and wild waves of the sea will be easy to climb or sail in those days, for all peace will come upon the land of the good. Prophets of the great God will take away the sword, for they themselves are judges of men and righteous kings. There will also be just wealth amongst men, for this is the judgment and dominion of the great God. Rejoice, maiden, be glad, for to you the one who created the heaven and earth has given the joy of the age. He will dwell in you. You will have immortal light. Wolves and lamb will eat grass together in the mountains. Leopards will feed together with kids. Roving bears will spend the night with calves. The flesh-eating lion will eat husks at the manger like an ox, and mere infant children will lead them with ropes, for he will make the beast on earth harmless. Serpents and asps will sleep with babies and will not harm them, for the land of God will be upon them. I will tell you a very clear sign, so that you may know when the end of all things come to pass on earth. When swords are seen at night in starry heaven, towards evening and towards dawn, and again dust is brought forth from heaven upon the earth, and all the light of the sun is eclipsed in the middle from heaven, and the rays of the moon appear and return to the earth. There will be a sign from the rocks. With blood and drops of gore, you will see a battle of infantry and cavalry in the clouds, like a hunt of wild beasts, like a mist. This is the end of war, which God who inhabits heaven is accomplishing. But all must sacrifice to the great King. I say these things to you, having left the long Babylonian walls of Assyria frenzied, a fire sent to Greece, prophesying the disclosures of God to all mortals, so that I prophesied divine riddles to men. Throughout Greece, mortals will say that I am of another country, a shameless one born of Eritrea. Some will say that I am a Sibylline, born of Circe, as mother, and Gnostos as father, as a crazy liar. But when everything comes to pass, then you will remember me, and no longer will anyone say that I am crazy. I, who am a prophetess of the great God, for he did not reveal to me what he had revealed before to my parents, but what happened at first, these things my father told me, and God put all of the future in my mind, so that I prophesy both future and former things and tell them to mortals. For when the world was deluged with waters, and a certain single approved man was left, floating on the waters in a house of hewn wood, with beasts and birds, so that the world might be filled again, I was his daughter-in-law. I was of his blood. The first things happened to him, and all the latter things have been revealed. So let all these things from my mouth be accounted true.